Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Most people don't think of St. Paul when they think of marriage. And if you're not religious, like don't drop off. This applies to anyone who, well, has been married because it's all about endurance. Yeah. So St. Paul, why am I speaking about St. Paul? Because, and what does St. Paul have to do, yeah, with marriage? I mean, St. Paul wasn't even married, but what he was is he was a celibate missionary, you know, which is not exactly the poster child for spousal advice, right? And a little bit kind of similar to what we might think of, Catholic priests is sort of like, what do they really know about marriage? I mean, even myself, I've thought about that in the past, quite quite frequently actually. But just like Pope John Paul, the more I read like his letters, they especially when he talks about the body and like theology of the body and his letters, his books, like all his writings, like my goodness, if I would have understood it the way I understand it now, I would have not fumbled the ball in my marriage the way I have. Because just like Pope John Paul II and like St. Paul the same way, they actually know what to love really means and what marriage actually means. The sacredness of it, to see it as a vocation, to see it as a covenant. And guys, again, if you're thinking, oh my God, who is this religious freaky woman, whatever? Okay, because again, even if you're not Catholic, if you're not religious, or it's I want to make this very just something that like a 22-year-old guy can listen to right now and get some relationship advice from who's atheist. If they're atheist, they're probably not listening anymore. But anyway, that's how I want to deliver my message. These two fellows and many people that get it, you know, in terms of what marriage actually is. I mean, these people knew it more than most, any like 90%, I think, of the couples out there. Like Paul didn't just write about romance. No, he wrote about resilience. And that's what it's all about, guys. You know, it's not some romantic Harlequin novel. And I'm not trying to say that, marriage is awful, like blah blah blah. It's all about resilience. It's like doing like the most excruciating decathlon, triathlon, whatever you want to call those extreme sports, whatever they are called. If you've been married long enough, you know that marriage doesn't survive on romance alone. Hardly. That's like a leaf in the wind. You can be taken in so many different directions depending on the weather, but you don't want your marriage to be like that, guys. You want it to be strongly rooted in place, not like a leaf in the wind, but more like an oak tree, that's been there for hundreds of years. So, yeah, what really sustains marriage is something far more beautiful than that, okay, than just romance, okay? It really is surrendered strength. It's enduring hope and a will to finish, what you vowed to begin. Because if you were married in the church or if you vowed to one another, vow is a real thing. And we don't see that. We don't see it as a sacrament anymore, as a covenant. We just a legal paper, a legal contract. And I hope, this video sort of helps you see it from my perspective right now. So let's dive into St. Paul's world and show you how his words written from a prison cell, and from shipwrecks, might be the very lifeline your marriage needs right now. So let's start with the first one. In terms of some verses from St. Paul, he said, "When I am weak, then I am strong." Pretty powerful, right? I remember reading this and thinking, men, men, you got to read this. You please read this, not because I wanted to scold or because it was such a reversal of everything we've been taught, men, but especially men, like who have been raised to think strength is about domination, like endurance, even this sort of like emotional stoicism, you know. But Paul wasn't talking about brutal strength, even though he was a very powerful man. He was a warrior. He was of Greek descendants. Yeah. He was no weakling, he was an athlete. Like he's talking in these times about divine surrender. That's what he's talking about. He was saying true power comes when I stop trying to be powerful. That's what he's saying. So, what does this look like in 2025? Because St. Paul, I think, probably died somewhere around 60 BC. So what does this look like in modern times? Well, guys, you don't need to win the argument. You don't need to defend every critique that's stated by your spouse. You don't need to be the loudest or the best looking, the best body. I I see men with body dysmorphia now. That probably wasn't the case 100 years ago. That now is. And yeah, you don't need to be the loudest. It's nothing like that at all. Strength is in the pausing, guys. It's in the listening. It's in the strength that, like, it's asking for help, you know? Yeah. There's a real strength in saying, I don't know how to fix this, but I'm willing to stay here and work with you on it. You know, wow, isn't that powerful? Like to say, I have no clue how to fix this. And that's what Paul modeled. It was never dominance. He modeled Christ, and he learned from the best, right? And that's what he wanted to teach is sort of like after you can't unsee what you've seen. And when you see what true love is, I think that's why the apostles became like like I don't know if they all died horrible deaths of martyrs, like what a martyr would, but they weren't pretty, you know. St. Peter was crucified upside down, and St. Paul, I mean, I don't even know. I think he just died in prison. But they were free in so many other aspects, right? They were never prisoners because they knew what true love actually meant. Yeah. So that's what our marriages need more of, especially in a culture that tells us to stand up for yourself, be independent, but what we need to do more is just kneel down in grace and ask for help. Now, the second scriptural reading that I just love from St. Paul in his first letter to the Corinthians is love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, and endures all things. You probably recognize that one, right? But let me ask you, did you feel the full weight of that promise on your wedding day? Probably not, nor did I. Because the truth is you don't understand that kind of love until the job falls through, you know? un until you truly feel what resentment feels like. Until an illness hits you, your spouse, your family, where you're torn between like helping a parent and being there for your partner, or the job loss or whatever that is. Like you don't feel what that actually means, that verse, that lovely verse, until your spouse becomes a stranger to you one day and you wonder if this is the same person that you actually said I do to. I know I've felt that way. There's a season in my marriage for sure where I've made a lot of one-sided decisions, which I felt was, independence, autonomy, and all these other things that were told women need to rise up to, but it really was just a wolf in sheep's clothing. It was control over any sort of strength, I felt. Um, I didn't tr I didn't trust my husband to lead at that time, and I justified it too. I just felt, I've got the degrees, I've studied this, the certifications, the plan, but really I was just tired. I was just probably exhausted, and I had nothing left in the tank. No energy at all to work things through, doing it all, thinking I was the best thing since sliced bread. Um, but my marriage was dying. So, um, and it's just when that happens, you just become resentful. Resentment is the first thing that overtakes what should be there, which is love, and commitment. Resentfulness just replaces it. And, it wasn't until we separated for a few months that I truly felt the the ache of what we were losing. We were losing the fight. We were losing the race, you know. And that moment, this verse came alive for me, because endurance isn't passive, guys. It's a spiritual discipline. It's a fight, not against each other, but fighting for each other. And that's why I have the following verse on my website, the last of St. Paul's, which I'm sure there's others, but these are just recent ones that I came across. I was like, whoa, I got to talk about this. This guy really knows what he was doing, And that last one is, I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I've kept the faith. So, yeah, you if you go to my website, you'll see this one because I just feel Paul wrote these words, you know, thinking about marriage. I'm sure he wasn't. I'm sure he wasn't. But, he prepared these words. He wrote this this piece of scripture when he was dying in a prison. He didn't write them from a stage. He didn't have them up on PowerPoint. He was at his breaking point, you know. And so that, like, when you think of it like that, he was broken, but in a sense, he was victorious, you know, because faithfulness remained. That's the faithful endurance when the world stops clapping for you. He still had it. There was no applause for him. It's only now in 2000, like 2000 years later, that hopefully we're applauding, sorry. Yeah. And that's why I wanted to bring this to you today, because that's marriage. When no one notices you trying, when that hurt is only what you feel like You're the only one feeling that hurt right now. Like no one else is. You got to think about this. Well, yeah, and when forgiveness, is given, but you never feel it in response, maybe, you know, you feel like you're always the one forgiving, you know. It's like when, another fight at the table, another argument at the island, another dismissive comment from your child, I don't know, you feel like you're doing it all wrong. It's like your family barely survived it another year, but that's something to cheer about, guys. Heaven cheers louder than the world ever could, for you. And yeah, those moments where you forgive your spouse, where you recommit again, where you get back at that table and you renegotiate again, even though you feel like you've come to this same sort of conflict over and over again and nothing's changing. When you're holding hands in a hospital bed, right? That's the good fight. And that's the real win, guys. So when we think of St. Paul and we think of marriage and we realize he never was married, well, he was. He was married to Christ. He saw what love really was, and he wanted to profess that and go on a mission for that. And he did it faithfully, painfully, patiently, just beautifully. He didn't speak about marriage in the terms of compatible, are you compatible with one another, or personality quizzes or, love languages. He didn't write those books, but he spoke of the covenant of marriage. He spoke of the vocation to love, you know, the ongoing commitment. And I mean, that's really the Christ-like love I'm talking to you about, not the kind that flatters, pasted in a romance novel, scripted out like that. That's not Christ-like love, guys. That's something for those authors that take you to Never Never Land, but it's a type that really transforms suffering into sanctification. And yeah, so, and really, isn't that what we really want? A love that's bigger than feelings, a love that endures, a love that's not based on your emotional roller coaster that you're going through that day. Yeah, it's that kind of love, a love that just really endures all the storms. And that kind of love is what saves us. So if you're in a hard season right now, if you're tired, resentful, or thinking about giving up, I hope this video landed in your feed today. Because remember, no one said it was going to be easy. Like no one said that finishing this race doesn't was going to be easy. It means you didn't let go. It means like you kept your eye on the finish line. And the finish line really is God. Yeah. So as always, if this message to you today about St. Paul helped you in your marriage, resonated with you in any way, gave you some hope, I that's the whole point of it. I want maybe you to stop analyzing your spouse, diagnosing him with whatever latest mental illness is on TikTok or whatever. No, I want you to instead like reflect on your own surrendering of strength. You're giving it up. Like, yeah, just let grace lead you. Say a prayer, because you'll you'll be helped. if you do that. God's always listening. Okay. So you got to make a decision. Are you going to lean on God, or are you just going to like white knuckle it? Just focus on your own will. I hope you choose the first option. Okay. So, yeah. And let me know if you like this conversation, if you want more conversation about marriage, vocation, being a covenant, a touch of real life grit, then subscribe and keep the conversation flowing. Okay? Because you got to keep the faith, as St. Paul says. We need to keep the faith. Thanks for listening.